I want to thank you for making us feel so welcome at Arizona Camp Meeting. But I'm going to read this passage. I'm going to ask you two questions about the passage, and then I'm going to go in my car and I'm going to leave. Psalm 90, verse 10. The days of our lives are 70 years. And if by reason of strength they are 80 years, isn't that amazing how accurate that is? We think that 70 and 80 is a new achievement because not too many generations ago we were only making it to 40-something. But over the whole span of human history, this has been pretty accurate. 70, 80. Some of us go on to 90, 100. I think there's somebody out there now who's 114, 115. But generally speaking, if by strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. Thomas Hobbes, the political philosopher, when he wrote his book Leviathan in the Middle Ages, said the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Got that right out of the book of Psalms. Verse 11, who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath. Now here's our text. Here's what I want you to contemplate for the next few minutes with me. This next verse, verse 12, is something that has become especially pertinent to me in the last 5 years. So teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Father in heaven, because this is not man's word but your word, I'm going to ask for a special blessing tonight. I want to ask, Father, that you would bless me with the ability to think clearly, but more than that, think biblically. I don't have what it takes to represent Jesus faithfully. I just don't. And so I'm asking that once again you would take a coal from heaven's altar and you would give me the ability to represent your thoughts in a way that would leave you smiling by the time we're done. I just want to be faithful. So forgive my sin. Cover me with the blood of Christ. Enable me, Father, to present your thoughts in a way that draws us all closer to Jesus Christ. And I ask this saying that we will follow when Jesus calls. We covenant that with you. So speak now. Change our hearts. Let us become more like Christ. Peter wrote that we are born again by the Word of God. Let that happen for us tonight, I'm asking. Let this change us. Pull us into your presence. And I ask it in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. The art of numbering days is a relatively new art. It's only a few thousand years old. It came after sin, because we have to understand that Adam and Eve didn't have to number their days, not before they rebelled. They had all the time in the world. They didn't need a PDA. Well, that's old technology now. They didn't need iCal. They didn't need Outlook. They didn't need a Franklin Covey time management system, because they had all the time in the universe. Adam could start a project today, and if he didn't get the project done today, he could come back to it tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, next week or next month or 10,000 years from now, because he wasn't going to run out of time. Imagine a universe where time is not an issue. Imagine all the things that we have had to work into our lives because we have to count our days. We don't have unlimited time anymore. Adam did. Eve never came to Adam and said, you know what, it's time to build a bungalow because the arthritis in my knee is starting to get a little bad and I don't want to go up and down the stairs anymore, so why don't we build the bungalow now before we really need it later? And Adam never came to Eve and said, you know something, I've got these brochures, it's an all-expenses paid cruise out there in the Persian Gulf, and I know we can't afford it now, but we should just splurge and do it while we're young because later we might not be able to do this. They never did that. They didn't have to count time. They never had to consider the fact that there was an expiry date on their lives. And then sin comes along and sin changes it all. Suddenly in the background of every human life there's a clock that starts ticking away the seconds that you've got left. It's there. It's in the background of every life. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. I'm going to ask you two questions. Question number one. What would it look like if you actually lived life well? I mean, you did it perfectly. You got to the end and you had no regrets. What would a good life, let's say a perfect life, look like? A life where you get to the end and you know, I lived well. Now, in today's world, that's not a popular question anymore. Nobody likes to say that there's a right way and a wrong way to live. Especially since the 1960s, when Joseph Flesher, the professor, put out his book Situation Ethics and said, there is no right or wrong, there's just what's right for you and what's right for me, or what's wrong for you and what's wrong for me. But there is no absolute right or wrong at all. Just live the way you want. Be true to you, and that's the right kind of life. And so everybody says there is no right and wrong way to live. Just do what you want. Do what thou wilt. That's what we say. But in our hearts, we know that's not true. I don't care how relativistic an individual is in their deepest thoughts, in their heart, they don't really believe it. They don't. Because we can all look at an 18-year-old guy who sits on the couch all day long playing on his PlayStation, drinking beer, goes out every weekend. He will not get a job. He will not go to college. He won't do anything with his life. And we all look at that. And we say, that's not the right way to live. That's a waste of your time. Even the 18-year-old in his heart knows that. Knows it. We can look at a young woman who marries the wrong guy and he keeps her under his thumb. He will not let her live her life. And we all look at that and we say, that's an awful marriage. That is no way to live your life. We all go to a funeral on the weekend and we gather around the casket of a young person who did something stupid on a Saturday night and cut his life short. And we all look at that and we say, what a waste of a life. We know the wrong way to live when we see it. We all do. So if there's a wrong way to live, there's got to at least be a better way to live. And if there's a better way to live, maybe there's a best way to live. Maybe there's the right way to live. What would be the right way to live? It's a good question. And it's a question that everybody's going to ask at some point. You should ask it. And I'm telling you, it's better to ask that question early when you can still do something about it than to ask it too late. Because I don't know if you've heard it, but I have. There is a clock ticking in the background of every single human life. If you listen, you can hear it. I've become more aware of it in the last 5 years. I have heard it ticking very loudly. A few years ago, I had a back surgery. And I fell over in Eastern Europe. In the airport, I was on the floor, both legs went out, and I'm laying on the floor and I can't get back up. And I don't speak the language, so I can't ask for help. And everybody's just stepping over me. Because it's Eastern Europe, at 6 o'clock in the morning, they think I've been drinking already. Finally, I crawled onto an airplane. I flew to Amsterdam. I flew all the way back to LA, and I went to the doctor. He sent me to a specialist, and the specialist took pictures, and he called me into his office, a surgeon. He said, we need to operate. You got discs blown out in every direction. I don't know what you did, but you did it right. I said, I don't want surgery. He said, we have to do surgery. I said, I don't want surgery. He said, we have to do it. If we don't do surgery, you're going to become incontinent. I said, I already live on the continent now. He said, no, you don't understand. You're going to start having accidents. I said, oh, in that case, I pulled out my Swiss Army knife. I put it on his desk. I said, I'll lift up my shirt. You can operate right now. He said, how about Wednesday? I said, good. And I told Jean, I said, Jean, you know, this is exciting. I'm going to have back surgery. He said, what's so exciting about that? I said, because I'm going to be home for the weekend. And I'm never home for the weekend, ever. And we can have company over on Sabbath. I'm having the surgery on Wednesday. We'll have company over. And you like company over. And she said, I don't think you're going to want company. I said, oh, I am. They told me that, this is the miracle of modern science. They told me I'll be on my feet the next day. Now, what they actually meant was that a physiotherapist would come in and force me to my feet the next day, and I would have the most unchristian thoughts since I had had since my baptism, right at that moment. And they laid me back. I was in bed for 9 weeks. 9 weeks. Bored to tears. Had my laptop computer. I surfed the whole internet. I got all the way to the end. I saw everything. And then I was bored. So one night I thought, I got to do something for amusement. And I got out of bed very, very quietly. And I got my walker. I'm all practiced up on a walker already. And I went down the hall as quietly as I could because I didn't want Jean to hear what I was about to do. I was going to wake the kids up and have fun. And I opened the first door, and there was Naomi. She was, I think, 5, and she was so sweet when she was asleep. I didn't want to disturb that. They're so sweet when they're asleep. And so I closed the door, opened the next door, and there's Natalie in bed. She's under the blankets reading with a flashlight. It's hard to get mad at your kids when they're reading, right? But there she is, past curfew, reading under the blankets with a flashlight. The minute she hears the door open, flashlight went off. I said, no, it's not Mom, it's Dad. Flashlight came back on. And she stuck her head out from under the covers. She said, Daddy, what do you want? I said, I just want to hang out. Came over to the bed very carefully on my walker and sat down on the edge, and we talked, and I looked at her little 8-year-old face in the moonlight, and I got jealous. I thought, you're 8. You can live life exactly right. You don't have to make a single mistake. That every parent gets this. You don't have to make any of the mistakes I made. You don't have to have any of the regrets I've got. I was jealous, and I said, honey, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to be when you grow up? She said, oh, that's easy. I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a teacher, or I want to be a mommy. I said, that is great. I said, why don't you do all of them? Do you think I could? Yeah, absolutely. You could do all those things. First, become a doctor and a specialist at that, so that, because Daddy doesn't have a pension, and you can take care of him in his old age, and then you could go back and teach other doctors, and you could have kids too. You could do all those things. Really? I said, yes, you could do anything you want. Oh, good. I leaned over, I kissed her on the forehead. I said, good night, honey. And then I had this thought. I asked her another question. I said, why do you want to do those things? She said, because I just want to help people. How is it when we're little we get it? And then we let the world beat it out of us over the next 60 years. We pull into our shells. We become cynical. I said, that's wonderful. I kissed her on the forehead again. I got my walker and I headed for the door, and I was just about to leave the room, and I heard a voice. Besides, Daddy, the next time you need surgery, I can do it. So I'm not going to need surgery again for a long time. This is just a freak occurrence. And she said, oh no, Dad, that's not true. You'll be 50 before too long, and that is old. You're going to need a new knee, and you're going to need a new hip. You might even need a plate in your head, and I'll do it all for a discount. I went to bed that night, and I felt absolutely horrible. I woke Jean up at 2:30 in the morning. I said, it's awful. She said, what's awful? I said, I burned through more than half a tank of gas, and I don't know what's left in the bottom of the tank. She said, you're not even driving yet. What are you talking about? I said, no, not the car, me. I don't know what I got left. I don't know. She said, go to sleep. You'll feel better tomorrow. I didn't. I got back on the internet. I thought other guys might feel like this at some point in their lives, and yes, they do. We all do. I went surfing around and thought, okay, every guy feels like that. And then I stumbled across this website. If I ever catch the kid that made this website, it was the internet death clock. You put in your vital statistics, the year you were born, a few other things. Do you smoke? No. Do you drink? No. A few other little details. Then based on the national average, it tells you exactly what day you can expect to die. Fortunately, I'm going to die on a Sabbath. I can preach in the morning. My wife can have a free potluck dinner and then take me out to it's Sabbath afternoon. That wasn't the worst part of the website. The next thing that happened, clock popped up and it started to count down your seconds. It was running out in front. 1.8 billion seconds, that's all I got left. That's the first time I checked it the other day. I'm down to 1.3. That's a lot of seconds, is it? By the time I'm done speaking, I'll have burned through 3,600. This time tomorrow night, 86,000. In just under 2 weeks, 1 million. It's not a lot. Not a lot. Then things went wrong for us. Many of you know I had to step down from my job at one point. I got sick. We couldn't explain it. Jean would wheel me into the ER on a regular basis. I almost had a chair with my name on it in there, and there were days I couldn't form sentences and my fingers moved by themselves, and it was just awful. And then one day I had chest pain, and I tried to ignore it all day Because I'm a guy. Guys ignore it, right? You only go to the hospital when you have to. And they wheeled me in there, and I was laughing, saying, I don't need to be here yet again. And then I heard the monitor change. The tone went straight. Beep. And I started sliding down this hole. Everything got dark and sucked off into the distance, and Jean panicked, jumped up. It was good to know she cared. She jumped up and she yelled, "You're flatlining," and she's trying to push my eyes back open. And I'm thinking to myself, you know I hate it when you touch my face. I hate that. It was almost my dying words. Don't touch my face! And there I went down. That's it. Gone. And I'm telling you something. On the way down, I thought of a couple of things. Number one, I thought, I'm okay. I got Jesus. If this is it, if this is the finish line, I'm okay. I'm okay. But I did feel cheated. I thought, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. This came too fast. Do me a favor, close your eyes. You're on the gurney now and you're hooked up to the machine and it flatlines and you got 3 minutes left. You may as well practice, because if Jesus doesn't come, this is not if. This is when. You're sliding down, it's going dark, and there's one question. Are you okay with the way you spent your life? You can open your eyes. Second question. What's the greatest need that a human being has? What is it? People say, oh, easy, food, shelter, water. Can't live without those things. I'm not talking physiological needs. I'm talking psychological needs, emotional needs. And everyone says, oh, that's easy. It's love. That's the greatest need. That's because we've been raised in a top 40 generation and we hear it on the radio all the time. Love is all we need, right? What is it? Love is all I need is love. Oh, you know the song. We've been raised on this, and love is important. We know what happens when people aren't loved. They don't thrive. We know what happens in an orphanage when people don't pick up the babies and coo to them and cuddle them and sing to them. They don't thrive. Yes, love's important. It is very important. But is it your deepest need? No, it's not. You know what your deepest need is as a human being? Your deepest need is to know that your life means something. That's deeper. It's deeper. You want to know, when I'm done, when I cross the finish line, is anybody even going to notice that I'm gone? If the Lord doesn't come and somebody's walking through the graveyard and they wipe the moss off of a headstone and see my name, is it going to matter to anybody? That's what you want to know. Am I just going to fade into obscurity? One more of billions of people who just pass away and nobody even knows. And I guess you could combine both questions into one if you're a believer and ask this question. Did my life put a smile on the face of God? That's the question. I mean, about the last thing you want to discover is that you wasted your life. You don't want to discover that. I've sat with a lot of dying people. If you've never done it, you should. It's remarkable what's important in the last 10 minutes. And it's amazing what's not. In the last 10 minutes of your life, it will not bother you if you were poor. It won't. It won't bother you if you didn't have a cottage and you didn't have a boat and you didn't have an RV or a second house. It won't bother you one bit in the last 10 minutes. And it will not bother you if you were never famous. That's not going to bother you. If you never had your name in a marquee, you were never on Time magazine, you never made the headlines, never had a star in the Walk of Fame in Hollywood, you won't care in the last 10 minutes. You won't. You won't even care if your life was hard. A lot of people have told me I'm glad. I mean, I wasn't glad for the hardship, but I'm glad now because it chiseled me. It made me who I am. I have character. I found out what I'm made of. And people tell me that didn't bother them. But I'll tell you what bothers people. Do you know when I see panic? It's when they realize it's over and they utterly wasted their time. They threw it away. One life and they threw it away. They panic. I've watched it so many times. They panic. Listen to Solomon, Ecclesiastes 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What profit has a man of all his labor which he takes under the sun? Verse 4, one generation passes away, another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down and hastens to his place where he arose. The wind goes toward the south and turns about to the north. It whirls about continually, and the wind returns again to its circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. You know what he's saying? I'm going to die, and the world's going to keep going, and I didn't mean anything. Verse 8, all things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Isn't that the truth? You're going to get to the end of your life and you know you won't be done. You can't see everything you want to see. You can't hear everything you want to hear. You won't learn everything that you want to learn. It's going to come to an end. Verse 14, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. You know what his big question is? What was the point? What was the point of being here? You can build stuff, but it's going to crumble. Write a book, it goes on in a garage sale for 2 cents. Trust me. And you look at these words and you think, what a bitter guy. He must have been dealt a bad hand. And I'm telling you, if these are the words of some slave working in a factory somewhere in a third world country, you could say, he's just got dealt a bad hand. What an awful life he had. If this is the CEO of AIG in the fall of 2008, you can understand why he writes this way. This is a family recently on the street because they lost their home. You can get why they write this way. If this is a student in the hallway looking at his grades and he's got an F and he can't afford another semester, you can understand why he writes such discouraging words. If these are girls kidnapped in Nigeria, if these are oil rig workers in Algeria abducted, if these are the parents of a girl brutalized on a bus, if this is a family in Rwanda with 10 kids in a 10 by 10 hut, you could understand why they write this way. But consider the author. He's not hard up. He's the king. You can't dismiss the book of Ecclesiastes by saying, ooh, he was poor. Chapter 2, verse 8, I gathered me silver and gold, the peculiar treasures of kings in the provinces. I had man singers and woman singers and the delights of the sons of men, musical instruments. He was entertained to death, just like us. So I was great, verse 9, increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. My wisdom remained with me. He was educated, he was powerful. Verse 10, whatever my eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. He had everything he wanted. Everything. Verse 11, then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, it was all vanity. He had it all. But as he gets close to the finish line, he finds out he blew it. He wasted his life. Didn't do it well. He doesn't have the one thing that your heart craves, the smile of God on your life. Horrible to discover in the last minute you blew it. It's horrible. Horrible to find out you're on the wrong side of everything. I remember Steve. Steve was the worst soccer player in my high school. He was awful. And I was so grateful that Steve was in my high school, because if he hadn't been there, I would have been the worst soccer player in my high school. And now, because Steve was there, I didn't get picked last, I got picked second last, and that was bragging rights. Never forget the day, out on the soccer field, somebody passes the ball to Steve, and I'm thinking, why did you do that? And Steve took the ball, went down the field. I'll never forget it. It was the most miraculous. It was like the Red Sea parting. Everybody got out of his way. Down he went the field, and I think, this is a miracle. And he kicked the ball down the end of the field, went right into the net. And I'll never forget, he turned around, he punched the air. He was so jubilant. This was his big moment. Woohoo! Except he just scored on his own net. Imagine getting to the finish line and discovering that everything you thought was important is not. There's a story in the Bible that haunts me, Acts chapter 9. It should haunt you too. It's the story of Saul. It's a promising young man at the height of his career. He knows what he wants. He's going to defend the honor of his religion. He knows what to do. He's going to round up the Christians and have them put to death. And he knows that he's right. He knows it. I mean, he's got a license from the temple. How much more right could you be? He's the darling of the leadership. And then it happens, Acts chapter 9, verse 3. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shone round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul. You don't even have to finish the story, and you can know who it is. Jesus has this habit of calling people twice by their name. Samuel, Samuel. Mary, Mary. Saul, Saul. Why are you persecuting me? Then Saul asked two questions. If you were to get out of bed every morning before you did anything, ask these two questions, you will get to the finish line and you do it right. First question, verse 5. He said, Who are you, Lord? Isn't that the question in the great controversy? Who are you? The Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. It is hard for you to kick against the goads. Verse 6. Here comes the second question. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what do you want me to do? If you asked that question before you got out of bed every morning, I guarantee you'll get to the finish line and there'll be a smile on God's face. He went blind, sat in the dark for 3 days. I'm wondering what's going through his mind 3 days in the dark. I have a hunch I know, because I've been there. Almost a quarter century ago, I've been there. I used to think life was about money. Got out in the world, I thought, if I make a lot of money, then my life will mean something. But as most people discovered a few years ago, you can lose everything in 10 seconds. And if your life is about the money in the bank, when the money's gone, what does your life mean? What's the meaning of your life? I listened to a guy on the radio. He was talking. He said, I was making 15% a year. I was so excited. But he'd invested with Bernie Madoff. And he broke down on the radio, a grown man. He started sobbing. He said, I've got nothing. Nothing wrong with making some money, I suppose, but if that's what life is about when it's gone, what do you mean? I used to think life was about entertainment. I love music. I love that stuff. I studied music for 10 years almost. I love music. I love it. I used to think, that's it. If you can keep yourself happy, then you have meaning. In the second year of college, I did something colossally stupid. I had $100 to my name. And I went out and bought a TV because it seemed so important. Put it in my apartment. And I discovered something wonderful. MASH came on every night at 9 p.m. And then it came on again at 9:30. Then the local news came on at 10. And then the national news came on at 11. And at midnight, David Letterman came on. And that was amazing because in those days he was doing Velcro Man. He would put on a Velcro suit, jump on a little trampoline, and stick to the wall. And I never missed that. He did it for weeks. Then at midnight, Bonanza came on. I mean, I couldn't miss that. And it repeated again at 1 o'clock in the morning, and it ran all night. The only problem with all of that is I had a class in symbolic logic at 7 a.m., and it took an hour to get to campus. I got an F in symbolic logic, and I went and plea bargained my way up to an incomplete. And at the end of the semester, I had nothing to show for myself. I entertained myself. I wasted a semester of my life. It was gone, and I didn't mean anything. I hadn't accomplished. The only thing I learned was how to run squatters off the Ponderosa. That's the only thing I learned. Thought popularity, that's the ticket. Be trendy all my life. Except the other day I asked my kids, hey, is Daddy cool? Yeah. You know I was, right? Maybe power. My only ambition at one point was to run for political office. I was petrified of public speaking. I'm not sure how I was going to pull that off. But I went to every fundraiser. I never went to class in one other year because I was out raising money for political parties and working these fundraising dinners. I was waiting on tables, $1,000 a plate deals. And I remember I had to use the men's room at one point. I went into the men's room, and there was the most powerful man I knew of, and he was on the floor of the bathroom. Drunk, crying. He looked up, snot running down his face, tears, eyes puffy. And he looked at me and he said, I have nothing. And I thought, you've got everything I want. And I walked out of there changed. I thought, that's not it. Let me give you a challenge. Saul is in the dark 3 days. Do it. Go away somewhere. Get 3 days if you can. If you can't get 3 days, get 1. If you can't get a whole day, take 3 hours. Go and sit in a quiet place away from everybody. No cell phone, no internet, no television, nothing. Just you and your Bible and maybe your plans. And ask God 2 questions. Who are you and what do you want me to do? I promise you in the quiet of that dark, He will speak. And He will tell you what He wants you to do, but you've got to close out the rest of the world. And I challenge you, put it all in front of Him. Your calendar, your plans, your relationship, your service in God's church. And I'm telling you, do it now. Do it now while you can. You want to do this so that you're like Saul and not like Belshazzar. You do not want to wait until the finger shows up and starts writing on the wall, because then it's too late. The Persians are about to come through the gate. Do it now. There's a story in Luke 12 about a guy who comes to Jesus. It's one of my favorite stories. Master, please. Dad died and my brother kept the whole inheritance, the whole thing. I've been ripped off, and you're the great teacher. Why don't you go and tell him what to do to get him to do the right thing? Jesus says in Luke 12:14, man, who made me a judge or a divider over you? Who made me an arbitrator? And I'm thinking to myself, reading that story, wait a minute, Jesus is blowing this guy off. There's nothing in the story that says he's after something illegal or immoral. It's probably his. He's probably been to court and the judge says it's his. But Jesus kind of blows him off. Or does he? Verse 15. He said unto them, take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. Careful. You're more than the stuff you own. That's not who you are. In a few simple words, Jesus is ripping down sinful human priorities, and He issues you and I a warning. Don't build your life on something that doesn't last, because when the something that doesn't last disappears, you will mean nothing. Build on the one thing that goes on for all eternity. Jesus inherits a kingdom that is never destroyed, Daniel chapter 7. Build on that, because the rest of it. We were moving out of California years ago after I got sick, and we loaded the truck, and my daughter had built a fort out of a wardrobe box, cardboard box, and she turned it on its side, and the big flap became a door, and she cut windows in it and drew flower boxes under the windows, and she put pillows and some of her toys inside, and she even wired it for electricity. That scared me a little bit, but she wired it for electricity and had a light bulb in there, and it was her fort, her home. And came time to move, and she had loved that thing and loved that thing and loved that thing until you couldn't pick it up or it would fall to pieces. I loaded the truck, I closed the door, and she saw it still in the garage over with the trash. Dad, what about my fort? I said, I know, honey, but it's not going to survive. If I pick it up, it's going to fall to pieces. Besides, we can't get another thing into that truck. Dad, that's not fair. I worked so hard for it. I know, honey. But you may as well learn now that almost nothing lasts forever. It's true, isn't it? Your whole life is a cardboard fort. Your childhood went like that. Gone. Playing in the sandbox one day. Next day, they're going to bury you in the sandbox. Your youth is a cardboard box. It goes quick. Went for a haircut a while back. Hairdresser said, you're getting cul-de-sacs. I said, what do you mean cul-de-sacs? She said, you could park cars up there in the... And I went home and I thought, oh no, my hair, where's it going? Where'd my hair go? I found it. Now it's on my back. And it's just moving south. It all disappears. And Jesus, out of love for you, says, be careful. You are not your stuff. That's not a life. The biggest achievers in world history all have something in common. Do you know what they have? Regret. Alexander the Great Conquers the whole known world, 4 years flat by the time he's 32 years old. Gets all the way to the far coast of India, and what does he do? He thinks that's it. There's no more world to conquer, and he breaks down and weeps. Goes back to the ruins of Babylon, drinks himself to death that night. Why? Because his whole life was conquest, and when that's over, what does he mean? Julius Caesar follows in his footsteps. He goes conquering the world, and he gets to this city, and he sees a statue of Alexander the Great. And when he sees it, he breaks down and weeps. Why? Because Alexander was 32 when he did it, and Julius is already older than that. And his whole ambition was to be the youngest conqueror. He breaks down because now he doesn't mean anything. Napoleon. He's in exile for the second time. Calls his friend into the room, Count Montholon. He said, I got to know something. Do you know anything about Jesus? I don't know anything about Jesus. Well, says Napoleon, let me tell you about him. Here's what he said. What a conqueror. A conqueror who controls humanity at will and wins to himself not only one nation, but the whole human race. What a marvel. He attaches to himself the human soul with all its energies. And how? By a miracle which surpasses all others. He claims the love of men, that is to say, the most difficult thing in the world to obtain, that which the wisest of men cannot force from his truest friend. That which no father can compel from his children, no wife from her husband, no brother from his brother, the heart. Jesus claims it. He requires it absolutely and undividedly, and he obtains it instantly. Alexander, Caesar, Hannibal, Louis XIV strove in vain to secure this. They conquered the world, yet they had not a single friend. Or at any event, they have none anymore. Christ speaks, though, and from that moment all generations belong to him. They're joined to him much more closely than by any ties of blood and by a much more intimate, sacred, and powerful communion. Jesus kindles the flame of love, which causes one's self-love to die and triumphs over every other love. Now that I languish here at St. Helena, chained to this rock, who fights? Who conquers for me? Who even thinks of me? Who interests himself for me in Europe? Who's remained true? That is the fate of all great men. It was the fate of Alexander and Caesar, as it is my own. We are forgotten. And the names of the mightiest conquerors and most illustrious emperors are soon only the subject of a schoolboy's task. Our exploits come under the rod of a pedantic schoolmaster who praises or condemns us as he likes. What an abyss exists between my profound misery and the eternal reign of Christ, who is preached, loved, and worshipped and lives on throughout the entire world. Is this to die? Is it not rather to live eternally? Napoleon. Saul grows up, becomes Paul, writes most of the New Testament. And in 2 Corinthians 5, he writes these words. He figures it out. My ambition is to please him. Build a life on something that's going to pass away, and you don't mean anything. Build it on Jesus. You'll still be there 10,000 years from now. And he will read your name from the book and put a crown on your head and welcome you home. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. I laid in bed for 9 weeks. And toward the end of it, the door opened in the bedroom one morning. My kids came running in. Dad, happy Father's Day. Have I been here that long? I thought it's Father's Day. Dad, we made you breakfast in bed. And they brought it in, a plastic Tinkerbell plate. Dad, it's your favorite cashews. And cashews are my favorite. I love cashews. Dad, we made special cashews. We put them on the plate and we covered them with honey to make them sweet for you. And we warmed them up too. They put them in the microwave on high for about 20 hours. On a plastic plate. Don't you want some, Dad? Oh, let me try. And I pulled the cashew off and Tinkerbell's arm came with it. It was all gooey and melty. And I... Eat it! Oh, I ate it. Oh, that's so good. Eat some more. Oh, it's so filling, though. Well, Dad, you got to hurry up. You're late for the show. What show? They plopped a ticket on my chest, made with crayon. It said, "Admit one Father's Day show." So I got in my walker, and I hurry up, Dad. Okay, I'm hurrying. I found out something. If you go down the stairs with your walker, you're going to get to the bottom a lot faster than you thought. And I got down to the bottom, I collected myself, and I sat on the sofa in the family room, and I could hear the kids in the laundry room. That was their green room. They're getting ready for the show. Hear them laughing and giggling, and the door opened, and out comes Natalie. Oh, she hates this story. And I looked at her. Something was wrong with her face. Her eyelids were severely inflamed. They're bright red. And being the sensitive dad that I am, I said, "What is that on your face? What's wrong with you?" "Well, Dad, it's makeup." See, we don't have bright red eyeshadow in this house. Where did you find makeup? Don't somehow I'm going to get the blame for this when your mom sees it. Come on, you got to get the Dad. It's makeup. We don't wear makeup, but Dad, you do when you're on TV. That's true. But as HMS Richards said, if the bar needs painting, paint it. I said, "What is that? It's not eyeshadow, is it?" She said, No. How are we going to get off? "Don't worry, Dad, I thought it through. It's Sharpie." All right, let's see the show. They came out, they stood on the hearth of the fireplace. And they made it up as they went along. "Dad, Dad, Dad. You're the best dad in the world. You could have had tickets to any show in town. I wouldn't have traded you." And I sat there and I got it. So many of you are afraid to live the dream that God has put in your heart. I'm going to mess up. Yes, you are. I'll make mistakes. I've made colossal mistakes. But don't you get it? He's your dad. He's waiting for you to live a life for him. He knows you don't know how yet. So you go out there with all the Sharpie all over your face because he's rooting for you not to waste the one life you've got. Don't squander it. It's too precious. It's going to be over sooner than you think. Don't waste it. I know Steve's going to sing, but I'm going to ask you a question before he does. Most of you know what you would do for God if you couldn't fail. Something's been in your heart or your mind for years. You know what you would do for God if you couldn't fail. There are people you would talk about Jesus with if you knew it would go okay. Jesus told a story about a guy who had all the plans in the world and it was over sooner than he thought. "You fool," he said. "All these things you've saved up, whose are they now?" Don't be that. You know what you would do for God if you couldn't fail. You know it. You've thought about it. You've laid awake. You've heard it. You've felt it. Why aren't you doing it? Because you make mistakes? Yeah, you will. But you'll also be putting a smile on the face of your Father.
Don't waste it. Who are you tonight that has heard God for years and you want to do something important with your life for God? Who are you? Some of you have heard him speak to you. Maybe somebody tonight. Show the angels in heaven. Where are you? Just stand up and let everybody know you heard God speak. You're going to do something with your life. I want to have prayer for you. I'm going to be praying for all of you and rooting for you, and I know God is. Let's pray. Father in heaven, it's a little scary. We see this enormous assignment that you've given us, and it scares us. And we don't know what to do half the time. Give us courage. Courage to spend our lives wisely for you. And give us the courage of knowing that you're smiling and that you love us and that you long to see us cross the finish line well. We want to put our hearts and our lives and our moments, the seconds we have left, in your hand. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom.